Hi everyone, we're back with what in our book is section 3, and we're going to be starting with the prep skills of calculating a percentage. The steps in doing this is to divide the portion by the whole. Usually you'll be given or not usually, but sometimes you'll be given a fraction first, and then you'll need to put that into decimal form. So that's what we're going to be working on. So then once we have that in decimal form by dividing, then we're going to convert the decimal to a percentage. So let's start with, oops, I forgot to write 3. Let me write that down there. Okay, so we're going to start with 20 out of 50 is the first problem. So on your calculator, you're going to type in literally just 20 divided by 50. You could reduce this fraction, but it's not necessary. So you could do 2/5 or and do 2 divided by 5, but it's not necessary. So once you do 20 divided by 50, you get 0.4 or 0.400. And to convert a decimal to a percentage, and I'm going to put a 0 on the end because you can always put a 0 on the end of a decimal past the decimal point if you need to, and it'll help here a little bit. So I'm going to take this decimal and I'm going to shift it to the right 2 spots, and that will give me 40%. Now why can I do that? Well, 0.4, let me start down here, and I won't do this on every one, but I'll kind of explain it here at the beginning. 0.4 means 4/10. Okay? 0.40, since that goes to the hundredth spot, means 40/100ths, which literally means 40% because percent means per 100. That's why we call pennies cents. So 40% and 40/100ths are literally the exact same thing. And so this works every time. If we just take the decimal and we move it past the hundredth spot, then we can write it with a percentage after it. So let's do the next one. The next one is 110 out of 150, or 110 1/50ths. If we divide that, and again you could reduce the fraction and do 11 divided by 15, but I'll just leave it as it is. 110 divided by 150 gets us approximately, it doesn't give us exactly, but it gives us approximately 0.733 if we round it. It goes further than that. The 3's repeat. So it would be 0.7333 and the 3's would go on forever. But if I round it out 3 decimal spots, then I can say that this is equivalent to 73.3% if I shift the decimal over 2 spots. Now this was an approximation, so remember that 73.3% isn't exactly 110 1/50ths, but it's correct rounded to the 10th decimal for the percentage, or the 1000th spot on the decimal. Okay, so our next one is 8 out of 120, or 8 1/20ths. So we'll take 8 divided by 120 on the calculator, and that comes out to be about when you type it in the calculator, it comes out to be 6's repeating. Just like this came out to be 3's repeating, but I'm going to write this one down because this confuses people on the rounding. And let me fix that. That's actually, I missed a 0 here. It's not 0.6, it's 0.06. So let me fix that here. Okay, so it's 0.0. Still doesn't look very good. Zero 66666. So if I round that properly, then that's about 0.067, because if I'm going to round to this 3rd decimal spot like I did in the prior problem, then that 6, if I look to its right, has a 6 after it. Well, that 6, since that 6 is above 5, that tells me I want to round the decimal spot to 7, up to 7. So I don't want to say 0.066 and just chop it off, because 0.0666 is closer to 0.067 than it is to 0.066. So I'm going to round that to 0.067 first, and then that is 6.7%, if I shift the decimal over 2 spots. So 6.7% and 0.067 are the same. Now the last one that we're going to do is one that bothers people sometimes. We have a bigger number on the top than we do on the bottom. So 200 over 150, or 200 1/50ths. We're going to do 200 divided by 150, and that's going to get us approximately 1.33. Again, that repeats the 3s, so it's 1.33333. But if we round it to that decimal spot, in fact, I'm going to take it out one more decimal spot. Let's call it 1.333. But those 3's repeat on forever, so this isn't exact. Then that is, if I shift the decimal spot over, we could say that's 133.3%. If we wanted to, we could say it's about 133%. It depends on what you want it rounded to, what the problem calls for, what the situation calls for. Now, why is this bothersome to some people? I will see a lot of students, because that number on top is larger, they'll try to divide backwards. So they'll do 150 divided by 200. But the number on top is always the number that you're put in first, because this bar literally means division. So this literally means 200 divided by 150 when we write this bar between the two numbers. If you divide it backwards, then you'll get the wrong answer, because division is not commutative. You can't switch it around. Addition you can switch around. Multiplication you can switch around. You know, like 3 times 4 is the same as 4 times 3. And, 2 plus 7 is the same as 7 plus 2. But you can't do that with subtraction and division. 5 minus 2 is not the same as 2 minus 5. And 1 divided by 5 is not the same as 5 divided by 1. So you cannot switch those numbers around and get the correct answer. You have to divide it top number divided by bottom number. So now we're going to look at skill 2, which is performing calculations involving order of operations, specifically with fractions. So we're going to start with just a quick review of what the order of operations is. The order of operations a lot of people, when they're talking about order of operations, will use the acronym Pemdas, which I am not super crazy about, because Pemdas makes you feel like there's 6 steps in the order of operations. And there's really not. There's really only 4 steps. So the first step in order of operations is to do parentheses. The next step is to do, in the Pemdas, it'd be exponents. But in Pemdas, let me write Pemdas over here. The next thing, so we have parentheses, we have exponents, but then we see this MD. And a lot of students think that that means that you do multiplication and then division, but that's not true. We actually do multiplication and division simultaneously, not simultaneously, but together as one thing from left to right. So multiplication and division are like on the same level. We don't do one then the other. We just have to look from left to right for all the multiplication and division. So it's multiply or divide left to right. But that's the third step. It's not 2 separate steps. And the same thing with an addition and subtraction. So we're going to add and subtract from left to right, but at the same time. Addition is not above subtraction. We don't do all the addition and then all the subtraction. We add and subtract from left to right as they come along. So let's look at this first problem. So we have 8 plus 12 plus 22 plus 15 plus 19. Whoops, that was only a 9. Over 5. Well, in this, we don't have any parentheses and we don't have any exponents. However, the top of this fraction bar kind of acts as a parentheses, because we need to do whatever's on top of that fraction bar before we do the division by 5. And if there were other things to do on the bottom, we would do those too. So the top and bottom of a division bar sort of acts like a parentheses because it's saying do the top, then do the bottom, then divide. So if we add all those numbers on top, we get 66, and then we have divide by 5, and then we do just like we did before, we do 66 divided by 5, which gives us 13.2. So that's our answer for that one. The next one starts with a 12 on the top, and then 7 plus 3 minus 1 minus 5 on the bottom. And if we do that again, think of the top and bottom as having a parentheses. So we want to do anything on top, anything on bottom, and then do the division. Well, the top is just a 12, so we'll leave that alone. 7 plus 3 is 10, minus 1 is 9, minus 5 is 4. Now again, I didn't do the plus because Pemdas tells us to do addition first. I did the plus because as I went from left to right and all there was addition and subtraction, so I did the plus first because it was to the left. So I did 7 plus 3 first, then minus 1, then minus 5. And then of course 12 divided by 4, or 12/4, is 3. And then the last one that we have here for perform calculations with order of operations is 100 plus 250 minus 50 plus 300. And that's over 10 minus 5 plus 20 plus 15. So if I do the top again from left to right, I don't want to add and add. I want to go left to right since it's all addition and subtraction. 100 plus 250 is 350. 350 minus 50 would be 300. And then 300 plus 300 would be 600. And I'm going to do the entire top first before I do this division. So again, 100 plus 250 is 350. 350 minus 50 is 300. 300 plus 300 would be 600. And if you did the faulty idea of you do all the addition first, you would get 350 and 350, and when you subtract you would get 0. That's not correct. That's the incorrect order of operations. Just add and subtract from left to right and you get 600. So on the bottom we do 10 minus 5, which is 5. Again, I'm not going to do these additions first. Subtraction and addition are on the same level, so I'm going to do them from left to right as they come along. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 5 plus 20 is 25. 25 plus 15 is 40. And if I do 600 divided by 40, that comes out to be 15. Now for the next part, the next skill, we have order a list of numbers. So they have there's 3 steps here for ordering a list of numbers, like from smallest to largest or largest to smallest. But their first step is a little ambiguous. It says find the lowest number on the list, then write it down, then cross it off and go on. The biggest thing here is sometimes it's hard when you're comparing numbers of different types. So I'm going to add here that my step, we'll call it step 0 since it's before their step 1, is if they are not already either all have a common denominator or all in decimal form, then I would say switch them all to decimals, or at least write down their decimal equivalents above or below them so that you can compare more easily. Because sometimes it's hard to compare a fraction to a decimal, or say, 2/3 to 4/5 if they don't have the same common denominator. So I would say switch everything to decimals first if necessary, or write their decimal equivalents nearby so that you can compare the numbers more easily. So now all we have left for the prep skills is just to complete the prep skills questions. So on this first one, they have these worded a little different. With the ones that we were doing as they were explaining how to do them to us, they had this already written as a fraction. Here we have an additional little step where we need to kind of write that as a fraction. So the way that they have this worded, 120 is what percent of 500? It means 120 out of 500 equals what percent. So 120 is what percent of 500. So we're saying 120 out of 500 and then they want us to switch that to a percentage. So we're going to do 120 divided by 500, which is going to give you, if you divide that on your calculator, that's going to give you 0.24. And then as a percentage, that's 24%. We're going to shift the decimal over 2 spots. So 24%. So in this one we have 11 out of 20. It's worded just the same way as A is. 11 is what percent of 20. In other words, 11 out of 20 is what percent. So 11 divided by 20 would be 0.55. And if I shift the decimal over 2 spots, like I did up here, then I get 55%. Because remember, 0.55 literally means 55 hundredths. 55 hundredths, 55%, 55 per hundred mean exactly the same thing. So on this next one, we're going to do 7,000 out of 12,500. So 7,000 divided by 12,500 gets you the decimal of 0.56, which then if we change that to a decimal, we get 56%. I'll just write it over here. And then doesn't matter if it has a unit here in front of it. This has a unit of dollars. It's still 8.32, $8.32 out of $41.20. So 8.32 divided by 41.2 gets us approximately, this one we're going to have to round, 0.20194. I'll just write it out that far. Now, when we round, we'll typically just go out 1 or 2 spots past the decimal. So I'm going to take this 2 spots, so it's going to be 20 point, and then I'm just going to round 1 spot. So there's a 1 there followed by a 9. So I'm trying to decide, should it be 20.1 or 20.2? Well, since this is a 9, I'm going to round the 1 up to a 2. So 20.2%. So the answer for the first one is 24%. Answer for the second one, 55%. Third one, 56%. And then fourth one, 20.2%. So now we're going to perform these calculations. Since this has all addition on the top, I'm just going to complete the addition on the top. So 9 plus 12 plus 27 plus 11 plus 16 plus 4. And as I'm doing these on the videos, I would highly recommend you do them along on your calculator too for practice. So 79 divided by 6. You can always pause the video for a second if you need to do something and catch up. So then I'm going to, on my calculator, I'm going to hit enter and write this and get to 79. And then I'm going to take 79 divided by 6. And 79 divided by 6, it says to round it to the nearest tenth. It comes out to be 13.1666. It repeats the 6 forever. And so a tenth would be 13.1 or 13.2. Well, since there's a 6 after the 1, I'm going to round it to 13.2. It's not asking us to switch this to a percentage or anything. We don't need to move that. So 79 sixths is 13.2 as a decimal. This is 100 over this bottom number. If I take 12 minus 3, that gives me 9. 9 minus 14 gives me negative 5. And then minus 5 again, I get negative 10. So I actually get 100 divided by negative 10. If I type that in the calculator, 100 divided by negative 10 is negative 10. Since you have a positive divided by a negative, you're going to get a negative. So our final answer for this one is negative 10. So on the next one, we're going to complete the top, then we're going to complete the bottom. Order of operations says do all the addition and subtraction from left to right. So this would be negative 8 plus 4, which is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. -1 plus 16 is 15. You do not have to do that in your head, but the biggest thing is just don't do the addition and then go back and do the subtraction. Do the addition and subtraction from left to right. So -8 plus 4 plus 3 plus 16 will give you 15. If you type that into your scientific calculator, it will do that work for you. And just type left to right just as it sits. So on the bottom, if we do 10 minus 5 minus 2 plus 8, that will give us 11. Again, 10 minus 5 is 5. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 plus 8 is 11. And if we do 15 divided by 11, that comes out to be approximately 13 or 1.4 if we round it to the nearest tenth. It's 1.363636 is it repeats. So the 3 with the 6 following it rounds up to 4. So approximately 1.4. Now these, we don't have to worry about what I was talking about converting them because they're all already in decimal form. But if you had mixed where you had some fractions and some decimals, you might want to write down the decimal equivalent for the fractions. So in this case, it says write from least to greatest. So I'm going to look through here, and I think the smallest one is 9.2. So I'm going to cross that out and write it down like they suggested. Then if I look at what's remaining, I see 10 point something, and I don't see anything else smaller than that. So 10.6. Then I'm just going to continue that until I have them in order. So it looks like we have a 12.3 and another 12.3. We still want to write those down twice since they're listed twice. So 12.3 and 12.3. Sorry, my handwriting is horrible there. That's supposed to be 12.3 and 12.3. This is supposed to be a 1. And then next we have some 15s. We have several 15s. We have a 15.0, a 15.7, a 15.6, and a 15.2. So we have to be real cautious when we write those that we don't miss one. So I'm going to put the 15.0, then the 15.2. I'm running out of room here. Let's see if I can scooch this over without, nope, then I lose my numbers I'm working with. So I'll just start another row. So I mean, these could all be in one row, but I'm going to have to start another row. So then we have 15.6, and then we have 15.7. And again, I'm crossing them off as I go so I don't miss anything. 16.8 comes next. Then 17.7. Then 19. I have a 19.1 and a 19.3, so I'll write down 19.1, then 19.3. And then my largest number is 20.3. And then it's always a good idea just to kind of go back and double check. I originally had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 numbers. Just make sure I have 13 numbers at least. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I haven't skipped anything completely. Even if I mistakenly got one out of order, at least I haven't completely skipped something. All right, so we're going to stop here with this prep skills questions, and we'll move on to the class video.
This portion is actually for you to think about some good test preparation strategies and habits, but we'll go ahead and talk about some. So in number 1, what are some strategies you use to prepare for an exam? Well, you need to think about this for yourself, but you should think about some things like looking over your notes, reworking old homework problems, and maybe even creating your own review problems. In number 2, what are some habits you have or have seen that are not helpful when preparing for an exam? Well, some of those things would be maybe procrastinating or not putting in enough time while you're reviewing. And in 3, what are some strategies you use during an exam? Well, strategies during an exam that you should think about are relaxing while you're taking the test, reading each question carefully, and then maybe doing questions you're more confident about first and coming back to the ones you're unsure about later. In number 4, you're just asked to define class average in your own words, not in terms of formulas, but just what an average tells you. Well, most people think of an average as some sort of middle value that gives you an overall idea of what the numbers are like. In this case, an overall idea of how well students did on the test. So in 5 through 7, we're going to find 3 different types of average for this list of exam scores. We'll be looking at exam 1. So in number 5, we're going to find the mean test score. Well, the first step for finding a mean is to take all of those test scores and add them up. And in this case, that total comes out to 1001. And then you take that total and divide it by how many scores there were, in this case 13. And that comes out to a mean score of 77% on the test. In number 6, we're going to find the median. To do that, we first need to rewrite all of those test scores in numerical order. So take a minute to do that, and if you have a really long list of values, a spreadsheet or a calculator can help a lot with that part. Now, to find the median, we need to find the value in the middle. Since this list has an odd number of values, we do have one value in the middle. It has 6 above it and 6 below it, so that is our median, 80%. And then in number 7, find the mode. The mode is the number that appears the most number of times. And so looking at the list that we rewrote in order is actually helpful. You can see from that list that the one that repeats the most is 81. There are 3 of them. So that is our mode. Here we're given a spreadsheet with the points possible for each problem on an exam and then the points that a student actually earned. In number 1, we're asked to complete the totals at the bottom of each column. So adding up all of the points possible, it looks like there were 87 points possible on this exam. And then adding up all of the points earned by this student earned a total of 68 points. In number 2 then, what percentage of the total possible did this student earn? So we'll take 68 and divide it by 87, and that tells us that this student earned 0.782, which is 78.2%. And in number 3, what letter grade is that? Well, on a standard 90, 80, 70 grading scale, that would be a C. In question 4, problem 15 was an application or a word problem. What letter grade would this student have earned if instead of answering that question, she'd wimped out and skipped it altogether? So problem number 15 here was a 10-point problem, and right now she has all 10 points. What if she had skipped it? Well, if she'd skipped it, she wouldn't have gotten 68 points because she wouldn't have earned those 10. That means she would have only gotten 58. Well, if she'd gotten 58 out of 87, that would have come out to 0.667, which is 66.7%. In that case, she would have gotten a D. So that's what she would have gotten if she'd skipped problem 15. In question 5, we're asked for someone else, what's the highest grade you could possibly get on this test if you skip problem 15 but got everything else completely right? So if this is an 87-point test and you only missed problem 15, which was worth 10 points, that would mean that you got 77 points out of 87. If we divide that out, that comes out to 88.5%, which would be a B. In number 6, does this sound familiar to you, skipping a question because it seemed scary? You have to answer that for yourself, but it probably does sound familiar. Many people encounter problems that they find difficult or that they don't think they know how to do, and they're tempted to skip them. So in 7, what do these questions that we've been working on here make you think about in terms of taking tests and trying every question? Well, hopefully you've seen that skipping a problem can have a big impact on your grade. So it's really a good idea to try every problem in the hope that you'll do better than you thought on it, or at least get partial credit. Here we have some quiz scores from a class. The mean score is 69.4%. And in number 8, the professor's angry with his class because the mean was a D. Do you think, looking at those scores, that that's an accurate measure of how the class performed on the quiz? Well, looking at those quiz scores, it doesn't really seem accurate at all because a bunch of people got zeros, and other than that, the scores weren't all that bad. There was one D and all the rest were C's and above. So actually, this does not seem like a very accurate representation of how the class performed. So then in 9, we already know the mean. Let's compute the median and the mode. So if I want to find the median, first I need all of the scores written in order, and they are. It doesn't matter that they're in reverse order. So then I need to find the score in the middle. Well, there are 25 scores. Since it's an odd number, there will be one score in the middle. And if I can find the 13th, that's the 88. That's the score that will have 12 above it and 12 below it. So that's the median. And then to find the mode, I want to find the value that's repeated most often. And it looks like 100 is actually the mode. There are a bunch of zeros and a bunch of hundreds, but there's definitely more hundreds. So that's the mode. And then remembering that we already know the mean is 69.4%, which one do you think is the most accurate description of how the class did? Well, compared to the mean, I think the median is a much better representation. The mode makes it look like on average everyone got 100, but the median pretty nicely represents the fact that ignoring those zeros, the rest of the class did pretty well. In number 5, we've now found a mean, median, and mode both with and without the student's score of 0. The question then is, which of those do you think is the best representation of how students performed on this test? There isn't just one right answer to this, but you do need to argue your choice well. So the first thing that you should ask yourself is, do you think that the 0 should be included or not? And then the second thing that you need to ask yourself once you've decided that is, which measure, the mean, the median, or the mode? We've found that the mean is very affected by extreme values, so it's not always the most representative measure. The median often does a better job, and the mode sort of depends whether it happens to fall in the middle or not. So generally, the median is a good solid choice. The mean might be if you don't have any extreme values throwing it off. In number 6, after the scores were posted, the instructor says that the average was a low C, so it wasn't so great. Do you think that's accurate? So let's go back and look. That low C claim was the mean with Creed 0 included. So Creed 0 is pulling that average down. It's probably not an accurate statement that the class overall scored a low C average. What would be more accurate would be perhaps the median from this calculation or the mean or median without Creed 0. The median, in fact, didn't change that much. Those measures would give us a high C or a B.